الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد. Continuing our lessons on the fiqh of food and drink. Last week we were talking about the ruling on gelatin and we went into some detail. So inshallah, if you want to return to that, you can get the details about gelatin. But from there we moved to something connected to that topic and other topics likewise. So inshallah we'll talk about different enzymes that are used, animal-derived. Because we spoke about animals before, and the ahkam of slaughter, etc. Then we went to the byproducts from animals, and those are things like gelatin. So this week inshallah we want to focus on rennet that is found in the cheese. Before we get there, I want to just do a final topic about the gelatin and the vitamins. Because we spoke about that last week, but we didn't mention everything. So we said last week, Shaykh Ibn Uthaymeen, rahimahullah, and one of his fatwa when he was talking about the permissibility of gelatin, he then was asked about gelatin in vitamins. So I'll read what he says. This is the Kitab Liqa'at wa Fatawa al-Aqalliyat al-Muslimah, page 208 and to 209. So the questioner, when he asks, Shaykh answers and he says, if this material, the gelatin from the pork, is only the casing found on the vitamin. Because just for those who don't know, some of the gelatin, a lot of the vitamins have gelatin as casing for the capsule. It's a casing. So he said, if this material, the porcine gelatin, pork gelatin, is just a casing, and this casing will be swallowed with the pill, like capsules, then it's not allowed because it's a large amount. And it's possible that the casing is even more than the vitamin. The amount of gelatin that's in the casing, it's more than what's even in the vitamin. So due to this, it's not allowed. Then the questioner says, in relation to the vitamins then, if it's taken from pig fat or pig meat, then it's not allowed without ishkal. And the Shaykh says, then if it's going to be eaten, there's no ishkal. فَهُوَ haram. So this is Shaykh Ibn Uthaymeen's view. But there's other scholars who have different views because of what we said last week. So Shaykh, he said, gelatin is allowed, even from pork. But when it comes to vitamins, the Shaykh said haram. However, other scholars, the way that they approach it is just like I mentioned last week, that if we say that gelatin can become permissible due to the two principles, and I remember the two principles we mentioned last week, istihlak and istihala. Istihala but istihlak. Istihala is the chemical change from one product to another. Istihlak is when something najis or haram is put into something halal and it becomes absorbed in that product. So the color, the taste, and the scent is lost, even though it's still there. So some of the ulama, they say if we go back to the ruling of istihlak, then any enzyme that comes from haram sources, even in medicine, then the medicine still is halal. And you can find this in the Majalla, the magazine of Majma' al-Fiqh, volume 10, page 1432. They mention that the enzymes, they say even in medicine, it's allowed. And now I'll mention specifically the capsules, because this is the conversation we're having. What about gelatin in the vitamin? So here, one of the bahithin, one of the researchers in the Majma' Fiqh, Majalla, Majma' Fiqh, this is the magazine of the Islamic Fiqh Academy, volume 8, page 1405 to 1406. So this is big production, like big book. But every has different buhuth, different subjects. Here, one of the bahithin, his name is Dr. Muhammad Ali Al-Bar, he talked about this topic. And just I want to highlight the point he says. He says, in the conclusion is, the need to use pork in medicine is very small need. It's actually not very needed, because today we have lots of substitutes. Then he says, many times, medicine contains pork derivatives, like the capsules which are made of gelatin, mixed between plant-based and animal gelatin. The mushkila in the vitamins today is that we don't know where exactly it comes from. He said it's mixed, plant-based and animal, they put together. Then he says the animal gelatin contains gelatin from pork, cartilage, skin, etc. For the Muslim, he says, individual Muslim, for them it's best to avoid if it has pork. However, it's not upon them to do the bahath. They don't have to do a big research. Why? Because it's almost impossible for them to do research, because it only can be researched by someone who's specialized investigation. Because if you go, he says, the people of the West, in our land here, they don't write down on the products where the gelatin is from. So in this case, jahala, ignorance, is udhr. And if anyone wants to do more, they can check themselves. Go home, take your vitamins if you have, and check. It doesn't tell you. It says gelatin, but it won't tell you animal, which kind. Bovine, cow, porcine, pig. It doesn't say. It just says gelatin. So the mushkila then is, even if we were to look, it will not be clear because they mix. So now, what's the conclusion? Shaykh Uthaymeen, he said not allowed if it has. But the others, they say it's udhr now because you can't tell, first of all. Even if you try to check, you wouldn't be able to tell. So the conclusion then, if the vitamin has gelatin, Wallahu a'lam, khulasa would be that you can double check before you buy. There's solutions. One solution is to buy the one that has no gelatin. Alhamdulillah exists. There's even halal companies, I believe Noor Vitamins is called. Noor Vitamins, Muslim owned or Muslim produced vitamin, no gelatin. Then there's non-gelatin made by the big companies. Jameson, for example. Jameson is one of the most popular vitamin makers. You can find gelatin-free. It says on the website, you just buy that one or at the store. Then there's the gelatin, the one that has gelatin, but you don't know if it's pig, pork. In this case, we can't make hukm tahrim, we can't say haram, it's doubtful. But because we have options, safer to get away from it if you can. But if someone bought it and has it, we can't make a hukm because that's haram because of the ignorance that we have in the matter. Because a lot of people, they have it home and they don't realize it. And I'll be very specific. It comes in the vitamins which are gummies, like the candy, soft gel and hard gel. All of them have gelatin, something of it. I mean, if you just buy the regular one. And one last point, a lot of the times some of them may ask, well, who eats the vitamins anyways? Somebody will say, which community takes it? Everybody. But specifically vitamin D. And most of you probably know, many of the sisters and women, they eat vitamin D vitamins they have because a lot of women have deficiency in vitamin D. So even if you go home, you'll see that most of the women, they take vitamin D due to the lower amount they have. So even then, if you can check, and I checked at home myself, and I find it just says gelatin with no tafsil. So this is actually something very common. So inshallah, if someone to avoid it, it's better. But if they find it, they can't tell, inshallah, it's not haram unless you know for a fact. But now that we have alternatives, advice is, get the alternatives, and may Allah make it easy. Tayyib, inshallah, we'll move now to the rennet, the next topic. And this one is connected to the last topic of gelatin. First thing we have to explain, what is rennet? Rennet, according to definition, it's a complex set of enzymes. Enzymes, something you take from the stomach of mammals. Sometimes they take from the pancreas, sometimes they take from the stomach lining. This is what it is. Why do they use rennet? In order to help curd the cheese. When you take milk, you put the enzyme, it helps the process to make the cheese. It starts curding, and from there, the curdling that's happened, with also this, you can derive the cheese, and you can also have the byproduct. Usually they put casein as well. So the point is, rennet itself is an enzyme. It also has, sometimes rennet has pepsin in there, another one, lipase. Or sometimes just it doesn't have, or you could separate pepsin from rennet. Bottom line, it's enzyme. It has many, many, many uses. For example, you can find it in cheese. You can find it in some of the cheese products. Sometimes you'll find it as an additive. But usually it's needed for the cheese making process. This is the majority of use. What are the sources of the rennet? Here, the specialists say the rennet can come from 4 sources. Number 1, rennet from animals or mammals. And usually it comes from the small ones, the babies. The baby calf, the baby lamb, the goat, like this. They call this one the rennet from mammals. This is the most of the time when we think about rennet, this is what we think. But there's a second type, microbial rennet. This one you have to remember this one, microbial rennet. This comes from the lab. Microbial rennet is from the lab. They make it without animals. It says rennet, but it's microbial. So this is important because this one has different ruling than the first one. Second one, or third one we'll mention plant. But it's not very popular, plant-based. So the 2 major ones, animal-based rennet, and then microbial. It says rennet too, but like in different ruling. So So with this, the ulama then discussed the issue of rennet. It's not a new issue, it's very old. It's so old, the Sahaba, more than that, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he knew about it. And so how did the Sahaba, Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam first, and the Sahaba deal with rennet? And what was their position regarding it? So first thing first, let's talk about cheese, because it comes into cheeses. So somebody may ask the question, brother, what's the ruling on cheese? Asl, what's the asl ruling, original ruling? It's halal. That's the original ruling of cheese. Now with all these enzymes now that we hear about, some people think now some cheese became halal, some became haram. But we see that the Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, Sahaba, they understood it categorically permissible. And here I'm going to read for you the hadith. It's mentioned by Hafid ibn Rajab, 40 hadith. It's Kitab Jami' Ulum al-Hikam. Most of us we know. 40 hadith, Imam Nawawi with the 50, Ibn Rajab added, the additional. Go to hadith number 30. Go to hadith number 30. Here you have, mashallah, discussion. Hafid ibn Rajab talks about rennet in the cheese. In this hadith, he brings the hadith, Salman al-Farisi, radiyallahu ta'ala anhum. One day Salman said, someone came to Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and they asked him about a semen, fat, wal-jubn, cheese, wal-fira', yani the fur. They asked him about three things: fat, cheese, and fur. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam gave them a qa'idah. Al-halalu ma ahalla Allahu fi kitabih, wal-haram ma harram Allahu fi kitabih, wa ma sakata anhu fa huwa mimma afa anhu. Hadith Majah originally, sahih. It's a qa'idah. You should remember this, because the ulama, they take from this ayat many things. He said, Al-halal ma ahalla Allahu fi kitabih. Halal is whatever Allah made halal in His book. And like Ahmad Jidi was telling us today, also not just the book, in the sunnah too. Whatever is in the wahi, halal, halal. Haram, whatever is haram in the wahi. But then the last part, وَمَا سَكَتَ عَنْهُ, whatever Allah was silent by His own self. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose to be silent. Not out of forgetfulness, not out of anything, because He chose to. فَهُوَ مِمَّا عَفَى عَنْهُ. Allah has pardoned you for it. What does this mean? Semen, fat, cheese, and fur, halal. This is what he's trying to say, alayhi salatu salam, in a general way. Ibn Rajab, then he talks about how the Sahaba dealt with the cheese and the fur and all of these things in their time. And I'm going to mention this then. Qa'idah then, we just mentioned, if it's not mentioned in the Quran and Sunnah clearly, what's the asl then? When it comes to the food and drink, halal, al-hil. So if today you go to the market, you buy something, I want to buy some cheese, I buy it. I should not tell myself that cheese is originally haram. No, it's cheese, halal. Unless I have some clear proof now, you can bring to me and say, oh, now it's haram. Same thing, I buy vegetables, halal. I buy meats, again, meat that is from Ahl Kitab or the meat from the Muslims, halal. Until you can come and say this, this, and this. Here now, Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, what did he do with the cheese? How did he deal with it? I'll bring you then a hadith, Sunan Abi Dawud. Shaykh al-Albani authenticates the hadith. Hadith Abdullah ibn Umar radiyallahu ta'ala anhuma. He says, Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, utiya bi jubnah. He was brought one day some cheese. And it's important to understand where was this and what time was this. So this was brought to him, and this was after the Battle of Tabuk. Okay, the Battle of Tabuk, one of the latter of the battles, right? فَقِيلَ, it was said to him, إِنَّ هَذَا طَعَامٌ تَصْنَعُهُ الْمَجُوسِ. This riwayah said this food was made by the fire worshippers. فَقَالَ عَلَيْهِ الصَّلَاةُ وَالسَّلَامُ اُذْكُرُ اسْمُ اللَّهِ عَلَيْهِ وَكُلُوا. You say Allah's name on it and eat it. A different version, they brought him the cheese, and this is after the Battle of Tabuk. This is Abu Dawud's version. He said, asked for a knife, he cut it and he ate it. Now the Battle of Tabuk, who were the Muslims fighting against there? Anyone knows? Who was the fight between Muslims and? Romans. The Byzantine region. And the Muslims, we know that when they went there, what happened, but they found their remains, they left. So they found there's some food. Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam ate it, and from there we also noticed it was the Christian Romans who made it. Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam still ate it. And then in one riwayah it was mentioned, Hafid Hajar brings the Mutarib al-Ariyah, he mentions that it had rennet in it. He still ate it, alayhi salatu wasalam. More than that, time of Umar al-Khattab radiyallahu ta'ala, this is Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, hadith sahih. He ate it. Number one, he ate the cheese, he didn't ask. Second, the riwayah says that he said rennet in there, he still ate it. And he said, you say Allah's name and eat it. So one of the things that we find here, Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he fears Allah the most. Right? He says, hey, I fear Allah more than you, and I am more cautious of Allah than you. This is an important principle for us because sometimes you find Muslims, they worry about some things more than they worry about other things. The only way we can be truly following the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, fear Allah the way he feared. If here he was a little bit lenient, and somewhere else strict, like ibadat, We cannot come today and be strict in the food and lenient in ibadat. Maybe you find today sometimes we do bid'ah and no one cares. But when the food comes, is it halal or haram? That's the only question we hear. People, they have to change the way that they approach. Here's another riwayah found in Ibn Abi Shaybah, Musannaf Ibn Abi Shaybah, Rijal al-Thiqat. The narrators are all reliable. Amr ibn Shurayhil, he says, they came to Umar ibn Khattab radiyallahu ta'ala anhu with some cheese. And فَقُلْنَا لَهُ, we said to him, إِنَّهُ يَصْنَعُ فِيهِ أَنَافِيحُ الْمَيْتَةِ. واضح, he said, this cheese has rennet of dead meat. Clearly. قال عمر رضي الله تعالى عنه سموا الله عليه وكلوا. Just like Rasul said, say Allah's name and eat it. Now Umar Khattab, it's not like he didn't know. He heard that. Why did he make it permissible? Here we take two benefits. Umar Khattab said it's allowed to eat it, even though it had dead meat, rennet from dead meat. So somebody may ask the question, how come Umar didn't say it's haram, it has dead meat? Because the ulama say one or two things. Just like last week, istihala or istihlak. One of the two principles the Sahaba actually believed. They knew. Ibn Qayyim in I'lam Waqi'in, he mentions it. The Sahaba, they understood these qawa'id fiqhiyya. They didn't just go and eat the cheese not knowing. So Umar's opinion either is istihala or is istihlak. One of the two. So some scholars say this proof Umar understood that the dead meat that came from the dead meat, even though it's put in the cheese, it doesn't make the cheese haram. How did he understand that? Because you understand they go through some kind of change. Some of the scholars say that we're not sure the Sahaba knew about istihala the way that we know it, chemically. Because how would they check if it's chemical change? So Ibn Qayyim, that's why in I'lam Waqi'in, he says what is istihala, according to him and others, it's not chemical change, physical change. Because he says, Al-Hukum, Tabi' al-Ism wal-Wasf, Da'ir ma'ahu wujud ma'adama. He says the ruling actually follows the name and the wasf. If the name and the description go, the ruling changes. That's istihala. Not the chemical change we understood, which Allah gave us knowledge of. However, we know many kibar ulama hold that view. So maybe the safer view is that Umar held the view of istihlak. And this is probably safer. Because they knew a lot of cheese, to make it, you put a little bit of rennet. And then it gets absorbed. And Shaykh Islam Ibn Taymiyyah also says this shows Sahaba used to eat the cheese and they didn't worry about it. In his time, they asked him about it, he says, allowed. Give you a more clear example. One of the Salaf, Ibn Hanafiya, he said, Kulu jubnan arda. Eat cheese indiscriminately. Don't ask, all of it's halal. And why were the Sahaba doing this? Why were they eating all the cheese? Because it's healthy. They knew it has benefits too. So from here we notice that Sahaba, they had a view, the cheese and rennet, even from bad sources or haram sources, it's still halal by way of istihlak. Last week I read Ibn Uthaymin's view as well on this. They asked him about the question about pork fat or pork derivatives in the cheese, and he says, the Shaykh, لا بأس بأكلها. There's no harm in eating it, لأن عبرة بالأكثر, because the consideration is given to the majority. And he mentions the example, if you put a little bit of najasa in a lot of water, doesn't make it najas. Then he says, more proof, Sahaba used to eat the cheese from the fire worshippers, and they knew that their meat is haram to eat. So their meat is haram, but their cheese is halal. So inshallah, if this is understood clearly, rennet from any source, inshallah, is halal. Qawlul rajih. It's a more clear and proof. And I'll give you another example. This is a fatwa of Shaykh Islam Ibn Taymiyyah, the fatwa of Shaykh Al-Albani, rahimahullah, in Fatawa al-Madina, fatwa number 86, the fatwa Ibn Uthaymin, and many other ulama. The problem now comes, if we understand this view, did some of the fuqaha still say it's haram? Yes, some fuqaha, they hold the view, if it comes from a haram source, it's haram. Because just like gelatin, they say that even though the rennet can come from a haram source, if it's put into the cheese, we don't know about the istihala. So we say the istihlak is the way out. That's the correct view, istihlak. But now comes the issue that many people are not aware of. If we understand all of this, let's come to today's time in our market. When you go to the market today, you go and you buy cheese, a lot of the cheese you get doesn't have animal rennet anyways. So some Muslims, a little bit have unupdated knowledge about what's going on in the market. The marketplace today, when you go and you buy your cheese, you'll find that it says rennet, and most of the time it says microbial rennet. So just remember, microbial rennet means came from the lab, halal. So inshallah, if you find that, no problem. That's why if you find that with the cheese you have at home, you use for your pasta and your pizza, usually you buy mozzarella, microbial rennet. Now, if this is the case, then alhamdulillah, the animal rennet is not a concern as much. Because since the vegans and the Muslims and then the Sikhs and the Yahud, all of us came into the market, the ingredients started changing. So if you find microbial rennet, you know the origin is not animal-based. Now, if that's the reality, some Muslims, they still have not updated their knowledge. So they may see somebody eating a cheese and say it's haram. And then some of them, they get confused. They say that, for example, mozzarella is halal and cheddar is haram. What's the difference between the two? Because some people told that mozzarella has no rennet and cheddar or provolone has rennet. Is that correct? No. If you go, you find that some mozzarella has no rennet and some mozzarella has rennet. Some cheddar has no rennet and some has. Kraft cheese, for example, they have those cheese strings the kids they eat. If you check microbial rennet, and it's cheddar. Sometimes we'll say rennet without any kind of detail. Why is it important to know this? Because some Muslims, they become very misunderstood the issue and have a general blanket ruling. And then they make it difficult for others. You go further than that. Now comes the issue of the chips. And this is where most of the discussion is. Because someone sees you eating the chips, they have one of two views, halal or haram. Now, the chips that have cheese, like the ones like Doritos and those kind of chips, because those ones that have cheese. Here, I'm going to read for you what the HMA members, those members from HMA, because we mentioned before, HMA in Canada, the Halal Monitoring Authority, they're the biggest body of halal monitoring or halal certifiers in Toronto or in Canada. HMA, their members, they were asked on another website, their own website, about Doritos and nacho cheese and Doritos. Because people are saying it's haram. So the old fatwa that they have, remember, and they're Hanafi. It's important to know that, they're Ahnaf. And the reason why I'm saying that, because it changes some of the position that they hold. They said, from their original knowledge, when they contacted Frito-Lay's Canada, that they said that the cheese comes from or has animal byproducts which are not halal. But now, in 2020, they updated it, and they themselves say that Frito-Lay Canada has said the ingredients now in 2020 have changed, and some of it may not contain pork. So you see, companies update their ingredients all the time. So now, they have rennet or cheese that has non-animal enzymes in there. Even them, they say that the Doritos can become halal now. But some Muslims still living in the past, they will see you eating and say, well, what are you eating haram? And I'll show you, I'm on the website here, you can Google it. Canadian products made without pork enzymes. And on the list they have their Cheetos, Doritos, the rest of the ones that you know. It's a website, you can see it. And as Muslims, we have to be like this. We have to know our market. Otherwise, what's happening is that some Muslims condemning others without knowledge, and some Muslims have qawa'id they made up themselves. For example, mozzarella is halal and cheddar is haram. It doesn't work like this. More than this, if we look now in the market as well, we notice that the cheese that you can buy, you could find ones that have microbial rennet and some that have animal rennet. But the ones that have animal rennet, the question now we have to also ask, what if it has animal rennet and the kosher symbol? You say, now this is where it gets really complicated. Kosher symbol means what? Right? We didn't speak about kosher before, maybe we'll talk about it later. Kosher means the Jews have said it's permissible for them. There's different types of kosher symbols. Kosher means the meat, the enzyme that comes from that meat or that product comes from the animal which slaughtered according to kosher law. In Islam, Ahlul Kitab, the closest to them is the kosher right now. That's the 100%. Their meat is 100% halal because they do it according to Ahlul Kitab, and there's no. The Christians are the ones we said they have some doubt. Muslims today may get into a problem. They find a product, they're told it's haram, but the kosher symbol is there. How could the kosher symbol be there? I'm talking kosher for animal. Which means that the Jews have said that this meat, the enzyme in here comes from the meat we slaughtered. So it means that if someone says, it says rennet, it says something else, we said yes, but that source is clearly from the meat of the Ahlul Kitab. They don't eat pork. So some Muslims even get confused. They may see something, for example, yogurt, which yogurt has sometimes rennet or gelatin, and the same yogurt has kosher. So what do? Some will say haram still. How can it be haram? Yehud eating it. So we get confused. We don't even know. And this shows you, even more than that, monodiglycerides and the diglycerides, same mas'ala. If the origin is from the meat, the Ahl Kitab, or meat which slaughter halal, it's halal. Problem we have now, we have candy, it's kosher, and it has monodiglycerides. And then some of our communities say it's haram. How can it be haram? The origin is clear from Ahl Kitab, unless you believe they eat pork. So what's happening is some Muslims are so confused, they confuse themselves because of the principles are not clear. What they're doing, they're asking and they're getting answers, but they're not looking at the principles. Walk with the principles, you'll be safe. So from there we say, if it has a kosher symbol, kosher for meat, kosher for milk, there's different kosher, that gives you added assurance it's not from pork. Like in low kana, even if it was from pork, we say then, according to the ulama, what they said, it's still halal. Because of istihlak and istihala. These principles help us. And I want to then mention one more issue. But before we get there, as Muslims, we also have to keep in our mind that we should not think to ourselves that we can be any better than the Sahaba, radiyallahu ta'ala anhum. And the best of all of them, of course, the Salaf is Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. His example is for us. So what we notice is that Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, how come he was more easygoing or clear-minded in this topic? Because of the qawa'id al-deen. Otherwise, you have too much doubt. So last point connected to this then is, now we have another enzyme called pepsin. And pepsin is like rennet. Rennet could have pepsin, or pepsin could be separate from rennet. Some now researchers have said that pepsin is actually used more in cheese making than rennet. Mainly because I think the microbial rennet is available. So what is pepsin? It's the same thing. It comes usually from the animal enzyme or the stomach lining, etc. What's the hukm on the pepsin? Here we have the Majalla, the magazine, Majma' Fiqh, volume 10, page 1432. From the conclusion they came with, the enzymes that come from the pork, kal-pepsin wa sa'ir khama'ir hadima. They say like pepsin and whatever else of those kind of the alcohol-based derivatives or those kind of extracts that are used like yeast and likes, all of these they say is mustahlaka. They all become broken down eventually in the food. Fil ghada'i wa dawa'i ghalib. Whether food or drink or food or medicine, generally. So Majma' Fiqh, they say here, volume 10, page 1432, pepsin and the rest of those enzymes, halal. Now why is it important to mention pepsin? Because if you go to the pizza shop, you go to the places to buy food, you're going to get the pepsin. So sometimes the people, they Google, they check, okay, this pizza store, what kind of cheese they use? It says pepsin, not rennet. So now people say rennet is haram and pepsin. So no, we say pepsin and rennet, both are halal according to the fuqaha. So it's nafs al-hukm, same ruling. One last point then, whey powder. The last one that is directly related to this topic is whey and whey powder. And so what we notice about whey is that what is whey? Whey is the liquid byproduct left behind when you're making cheese. When you take the milk, you put the rennet or the pepsin, the curds, whatever is left behind, that's whey. You put it you dry it up and use it for your workouts. Now people ask the question, halal or haram? So the same now, the hukm on this is fara'. It's a subsidiary of two issues. The ruling of the milk and the ruling of the rennet. So if the milk is halal, obviously because we're not using animal milk, like it's haram, for example, donkey milk. I've seen now people, they're drinking donkey milk. I believe there's even a soap made of that. Subhanallah azim. So you stay away from that. Or pork milk, pig milk. We're not talking about the regular milk, cow milk. If the milk is halal, then the byproduct is halal. Some scholars and some researchers say that if it comes from the right milk, it's halal. Second issue, the rennet or pepsin. So if some will say, but it's got the rennet in there. Same thing. If the rennet is halal, or halal, rennet is halal, or pepsin is halal, then the byproduct is halal. So therefore, there's no problem with your pre-workout, inshallah, is halal. Inshallah. Because nowadays, people, they're looking for that non-whey, or some other whey isolate, or some other things that they look for. And this is a mashaqqa we don't need. Like we said before, if the fuqaha are telling us this, then we don't need to make our life more difficult. There's bigger issues we need to deal with. In fighting over these, we want to help. Especially when we have the salaf on the ulama on one side, and then just people who have their own preferences. If you personally don't want to engage in any of that, that's safety. And ahwat is fine. Being safe and cautious. وَالْخُرُوجِ مِنْ خِلَافِ أَوْلَى. Always getting out of khilaf is better. But then if somebody is actually thinking about his family, themselves, I want to live by something so I'm not going to be inconsistent, then you have to take a look at these rules. Inshallah, we'll end with this much. Next week, we'll take a look at, from this angle comes another one, or another enzymes. For example, then, issue of lecithin, L-listine, and those other ones like this. Then we'll get into the alcohols, inshallah. And so inshallah you'll see that the fuqaha and ulama have spoken about all of this, alhamd, so we don't have to have unclarity. One last thing is that when a Muslim also researches, they will notice that a lot of the information is online. So if somebody was unsure about what's inside the food I'm eating, you can check online, alhamdulillah, and it's all available. But the question about researching it also we said is, sometimes you will not be able to get an answer, and sometimes you'll get an answer. So if you look, you'll find. If you can't find, then you have to also remember what chapter is, what is this ruling for this overall. For example, like I said, of the vitamins, you can't find exactly the animal source at times. So inshallah, you could go with the general. Also, when it comes to researching it, it doesn't mean you go and you ask the person who made it. Because nowadays, some Muslims, what they do is they call the company. The company says there's a pig in there, so okay, it's haram. Sometimes the person will tell you it's haram. They're not faqih, tell you it's haram. They can just tell you what's in there. And I'll mention the incident because it happened, and just showing you why we need to uplift the community with the knowledge. Most of you remember when Oreos became halal and haram overnight. You guys remember this scandal on Twitter? What happened was somebody tweeted Oreos Canada or America and asked them, is the Oreos halal? And the company's representative said, no, it's not halal. Allahu Akbar. Some people were denial, they're still eating it, they didn't care. Then the next day they said, we clarify, we made a mistake. What we mean is that it's not certified halal. Oh, mashallah. So what happened? They confused everybody because you're asking them for a ruling. You're supposed to ask them about the ingredients. If you go on the ingredients, it's clear there's nothing in the haram. What they were saying is that we don't have a certification. And the Muslims were debating. I mean, this kind of stuff is not good for the community because if this is how unclear we are on this issue, many other issues which are more important, we can become more confused. So as Muslims, when you research, you can ask about the origin of products. When you get the origin, you go to the fuqaha and the ulama and see what they have said. Otherwise, if you ask the company representative, they cannot make hukm for you. They can only tell you is this or this. Inshallah, we'll end with this much. Anyone have any question on this? We'll take it. Yes. Exactly. Yeah, that's the conclusion. So we said now that if you find microbial rennet in the products, that we know is not animal-based, halal, and even if it's from animal sources, even if it's dead meat or pig, the correct opinion is by way of istihlak, فهو halal. So either way you have now comfort between the two. Alhamdulillah, microbial rennet is more growing, so easy. But now Muslim doesn't have to be tough on this. You can just buy the cheese instead without worrying. The only thing that we say that other products now, other things are coming up, but those ones maybe is a bigger issue. Inshallah. Any other questions? طيب inshallah. So next week inshallah we'll continue from there. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك.